The Declaration of Independence was signed, of course, on July 4th, 1776. And that document said primarily who we were not as a country, not who we were. And we were not going to be dependent anymore on England. But it wasn't until 11 years later, in 1787, that the U.S. Constitution was ratified. That's the document that said who we were, and the one that guides us still today. In the interim, there were many people that were worried that the Constitution would not be ratified. 9 out of 13 states had to ratify it, and so the Federalist Papers were written by Hamilton, Madison, and a few of them were written by Jay. In this story, we're primarily going to focus on Hamilton and Madison because they wrote the majority of them. What's interesting is that 12 of them were disputed. They weren't signed. No one knows who wrote them. And in the 60s, Mosteller and Wallace used something called stylometry to try to infer who wrote the 12 disputed Federalist Papers. What they did is they took these papers, and they're available easily online, and I'm just going to highlight the whole paper and copy it, go to Word and paste it. And when I do, immediately I see that there are 1,584 words. If I search for, and one word that they found out that distinguished the two writers was the word by. So if I type in here space by space, that'll find all occurrences of the word by. I want to make sure that it's not part of a word. And we already see that there were 14 out of 1,584 occurrences of the word by. What we do is they used the number of bys per 1,000 words, so you take 14 divided by 1,584, and you would multiply that by 10, and that would be the statistic for this paper, bys per 1,000 words. The next thing that we're going to do is collect these statistics by paper. The reason why the papers are not in numerical order is we put them in order. Madison wrote these papers, and then Hamilton wrote all of these. And we didn't include the ones with John Jay, but we did include the disputed papers. So we have 3 types of papers: Madison, Hamilton, and disputed. So what we can do is create, I suggest, we're going to put the author here, and we're going to put the number of bys per 1,000 words down here, and I suggest creating a box plot. And then now I'm just going to make these numbers up so that you can see what's going to happen, and I'll leave the investigation to you. What's fun to do is to have one student do 2, 3, 4, 5 papers, something like that, just breaking up all the papers into the number of students. It doesn't take very long, as you can see, per student. So let's say that it turns out that these were 12 bys per 1,000 words and 14, 13, 16, and so forth. We're going to have to change the scale. And again, I'm just making these numbers up so you can see what happens. And let's say Hamilton's were 5, 6, 7, putting in some numbers there. And then we could put in later on what the disputed papers were, and that would build that box plot. And then we can see, does one of the known box plots of Hamilton or Madison match up with the disputed one? If so, we could start to get some idea, just using the word by, who wrote these disputed Federalist Papers. Would be a lot more work to do to be able to conclude with a fair amount of confidence that all of them were written by Madison or Hamilton, but that'll give you an idea of the actual research that Mosteller and Wallace did to determine who wrote the Federalist Papers.